Are you tired of all the voices who say, focus on the bottom line numbers?
Say whatever you have to, just close the sale.
Just get the credit card. It doesn't matter what you deliver.
You will never build a successful business until you grow a pair and stop caring so much.
Here, we respectfully disagree. We give you permission to embrace who you are, how much you care, and encourage you to design a business that works for you and your clients. Welcome to The Art of Giving a Damn, the podcast that proves with every single episode that you can create a profitable business doing what you're passionate about and making a positive difference in the world. Now here's your host, Michelle Schaefer.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of The Art of Giving a Damn. We're going to have a very different discussion about approaching marketing today that I think you just might find both fascinating and a little bit of a sigh of relief when it comes to how you market your own business. I want to welcome Sarah to today's show. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on.
It's so fun to hang out. Thanks, Michelle, for having me.
Yes, I am excited to dive in and talk about this because you approach marketing in a distinctly different way than a lot of what's being taught out there.
Well, yeah, I try to really kind of have people question their assumptions about marketing, right? And I haven't always done that. So I have to say this is rather a new development. And I think we don't change things until we are so tired or sick of something that we're like, I can no longer do it this way. There needs to be a change. And I think we see that in many things. You know, marketing is just one of them, but there's other things, like we just mentioned politics, where there just seems to be that moment where there needs to be a paradigm shift, right? And we only get to that moment when it's just so painful to continue going on the same way. So
absolutely. And I would have to think that a lot of the listeners to this show have either been there or they're right now in that space with their marketing. So that's why I think this is going to be a great conversation for people. So for anybody who has not yet met you, you spent 12 years running an online LinkedIn consulting business, and that really inspired you to create a global movement encouraging people to bring more empathy and kindness into business and marketing. You've called it the gentle business revolution. I love that. Besides a podcast with the same name, you're currently working on a book to inspire heart-centered entrepreneurs to question their assumptions when it comes to marketing and give them permission to market their business their way. When you're not working, you love adventure, traveling, yoga, and nature walks, or spending time with your family. I love that. So let's talk about that. This idea of gentler marketing approaches. First, let's kind of define that. When you say more gentle marketing, what's the alternative? And what do you see as the different types of approaches here?
Yeah, when I first came up with this, I had this download, all of a sudden I was like, I got to reserve that domain name, Gentle Marketing Revolution. Yeah. And I think you and I are both introverts, so the gentle is not something that's foreign to us, right? That's kind of how we feel. Maybe we don't think of ourselves like gentle, but it just seems like a good word for us.
Yes.
And when I kind of compare that to the current marketing world or paradigm, I find that what's going on now is not gentle. And, some people refer to it as hype marketing or pushy marketing or bro marketing or whatever you want to call it. But it's those kind of marketing techniques and maybe also cookie cutter approaches. Everybody's going to do the same thing because the one guru told you to do it this way. So those are kind of the definitions that I like to use. And gentle is just being different than what's going on now, I think.
One of the reasons that I think this is such an important conversation to have is that I think for a lot of people, especially who are maybe a little more introverted or a little more on the empathic side, I know people who literally, like, it's not an exaggeration to say they've been on sales conversations where they walk away with like PTSD. Like, you were literally traumatized from some of the tactics people are using to try to sell you into things. And I think it scares a lot of people from doing their own marketing when they think, oh, I have to become this super hypey, hard sell, tell you you're going to die if you don't buy this right now kind of approach to marketing.
Yeah, exactly. And you just said the word, right? The word why we're wanting this approach is for empathy. So my main big mission is to bring more empathy and kindness to the business world, because what I've come to see, and maybe you're going to say, maybe especially on LinkedIn, because it's kind of a professional network and it's all business, and you got to talk. It's funny that I chose that platform to specialize in, and now kind of coming full circle, right? And so, but like, I've seen like a tough business world. And so that's why I think it's now really become my mission to show that we can do business with empathy and kindness. And it doesn't have to be just business, that expression, oh, it's just business, it's just not personal. I hate that. Like, that is so dehumanizing, right?
It really is, because one of my favorite quotes ever in a movie is You've Got Mail, where she says, whatever else business is, it should start by being personal. And she's talking about that concept of, you should know your customers, you should care about their lives, it should matter to you that they leave you better than when they found you, whether it's through selling a book like it was in the movie, or through your services, or whatever it is. I think it's easy to dismiss bad behavior as it's just business.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing, though. When I read your bio, that was the exact thought I had, was you were on LinkedIn for all these years, and LinkedIn is very much it's all business. We're going to stay very professional. It's not a very emotionally connective type network.
No,
so
exactly.
What was it that triggered that transition for you?
Yeah. So maybe I have to kind of go back quite a bit to my growing up. So I grew up, quite an interesting story. I grew up in a hippie community. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, my parents, they bought an apartment with some other, not an apartment, a building with 6 different apartments with other friends. And so I grew up, we had one apartment, and then there was 5 other families, but we were all in the same house. And so we were just hanging out with each other a lot. There was a lot of, eating together and meeting, and a lot of decisions were made together. And it was kind of this community feeling, right?
Right.
And so I moved out very early at 18. And then, as we grow up, we kind of want to do things differently than our parents. It's like, oh, I'm going to, and I think that's why I went to LinkedIn. Maybe it's like, I'm going to be a business person, right?
Gotcha.
I'm going to be like a professional. And so I did that for all these years. And I think the breakthrough I had after 12 years is I felt like I always had to hide a part of me. And not just on LinkedIn, but in marketing in general. There's always something that I was hiding. And yes, it was part of my upbringing, but it was also part of like the imperfection of getting started in business, and just kind of like who I am, right? Just being okay with not being perfect. If you look at the marketing that we see, it seems like everybody's perfect. Everybody has their perfect lives, and they have these giant businesses, and so we're like, wow, I feel like a loser, and it's just fake it until you make it feeling, where you just have to show up as being perfect. So yeah, that's how this whole LinkedIn kind of got started. And that's also where I realized I don't want to be the perfect Sarah anymore. And yes, I'm, professional, and by now, obviously, LinkedIn is what I do, and I'm good at it. But there's a whole other side to me that I call it the hippie turned business coach, right? And so that's not your standard LinkedIn consultant, right? They would never say that. So.
I love that, and it's funny because that was the side of you I knew was the LinkedIn side, and you're like a ninja on LinkedIn, right? And so when we started having some of these conversations, I was like, oh, okay, there's a lot more like perspective wise here than a lot of people that are focused on something like LinkedIn. So that was fascinating to me. And I think that's true of so many people. Like we start our business around whatever that thing is. And there are parts of us that aren't necessarily front and center, but when we're willing to share them, it really does bring so much more to what we do.
Yeah, so true. And I think it also brings up that conversation about, finding a niche or not finding a niche. And yes, there's pros and cons, but sometimes as entrepreneurs, we have this luxury of actually zooming out again. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm like, okay, I found a niche, but actually I don't want to be doing LinkedIn for the rest of my life, right? I have more to offer. So I'm zooming out again. And I think entrepreneurs sometimes, again, it's something like, oh, you should find a niche. Right. Well, maybe it's not for you. Maybe you want to have another approach to that.
I love that you brought that up, because I think for so many people, there are so many different areas that we're drawn to or attracted to, different things that we get good at, and business evolves, right? Just like we do, we grow, we change, and your business should be allowed to evolve with you.
Exactly. It's your business.
And exactly. Yeah. So let's answer a couple of questions that I know always come up when you start talking about an alternative approach to marketing and not doing some of the hypier things. Is, I think we have this preconceived idea, and this goes back to questioning what you believe, that the reason we approach marketing the way we do is because that's the only thing that works, that you've got to be, all hypey with it. So what has been your experience with taking that gentler approach to marketing? Do you see it actually working? And what do you think makes it work?
Yeah. I am in the process of collecting these stories for the book. Awesome. Because I think that's the exact question everybody is going to have, right? Those who have maybe not yet crossed over the bridge. Those are who are still, kind of like, I don't know if I can actually, make that move. So they're wondering about these kind of things. And so I'm collecting the stories because there are stories, but the funny thing is, Michelle, and we know that because we're introverts, those are not the loudest kind of stories, right?
Right.
Their business is just doing well because maybe they've always had a gentle approach to marketing, or maybe they've switched over, but they're not out there shouting, about their success and six figures and all of that.
That's true.
It's the quiet stories, but there's so many examples, and you are one of them, right? So it's just a different way of then talking about your business, and it's not the stories that we hear the most. So yes, it works, definitely. And I think not only does it work in terms of numbers, but what I know from people from whom it works, they feel so much better, right? It's like there's more joy in the business this way.
Yes. Well, the thing that comes up for me while you're sharing that is that absolutely makes sense. That those aren't the stories you hear because they are by nature the quieter people. So that totally makes sense as to why you don't hear those success stories as often, because they're not out there really loudly bragging about the success or where their business is at as often. Right. The other thing that I was sitting here thinking is, even when we look at big companies, you do see examples of that. Like if you look at certain companies and the way they market, the ones that are taking a gentler, softer approach tend to also be the ones that are tying it together with causes, like Tom's Shoes and companies like that. And that was one thing that I think if you're looking for it, you can see those success case studies. It's just that most of the time we're not looking for them.
Yeah. Like B Corp, every kind of B Corp company. So the B Corp label, those are
Right.
all companies, like you said, they lead with values, right? And they lead with a mission, they lead with the human connection. And and it's just working so well. And I bet you their marketing budget is like half of some of these other big companies, because people connect to them authentically, and they don't have to, buy so much ads. I think that's another thing today.
It is.
We're filtering out all this content that we find harassing or aggressive. And so,
yeah. No, I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the marketing techniques that worked even a few years ago on the internet, now you've got people on the Facebook ad clicking spam, like, I don't want this email, I don't want this Facebook ad. And so it's almost something that's unavoidable, a shift in the way we approach some of how we're getting out there. And it's funny because so many people will come to me and they're like, well, I'm not sure what to do with my marketing. And you could tell from like just the tone, they're already frustrated that they even have to look at some of these strategies. And so I'll ask them what's working. And they're like, well, I'm actually doing good. I'm full with my number of clients. I want to expand. Here's the ways I'm looking at doing that. I'm like, okay, so what's working? Well, referrals are working. People are telling their friends about me. And I'm like, you have the best possible marketing strategy already working in your business. Because that's that connection that you're talking about, where if you're doing things right and your clients are getting results, they're naturally going to refer people to you. And yes, you want to put an intentional process in place, which is important, but it doesn't mean you're not marketing. And I think a lot of people assume that marketing has to feel icky, that it has to feel like you're out there pushing yourself on people and that it's aggressive. And it doesn't. That's the thing I love about looking at different approaches to it, is it can actually be fun. And I know most people listening are probably going, no. Fun and marketing don't go in the same sentence.
Don't go
so
together.
let's talk about that part of it for a minute. Because one of the things you talk about is that it can be kind of joyful or fun to market your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like to think of this term reverse marketing. And when we look at the traditional marketing, we always start with our ideal client, right? It's very, the words customer centric and always the understanding our avatar, target audience, right? That is the main talk if you look at any kind of marketing program. And I'm not saying that's wrong. That's still very important. In my approach, we just come even more with the empathy. So understanding what they feel in order to be able to serve them best. But the reason I call it reverse marketing is I actually want to start with ourselves as the entrepreneur. Like, we are in business because we chose to, run our own company. So why not start with how we want to feel, how what we are passionate about, what our values are. You just mentioned the big companies are leading with values and it's working really well for them. Well, how come we are not doing that? How come we always start with the client? You know what? The funny thing is, Michelle, that often our most ideal client, they are very similar to ourselves. Like if you think about your ideal clients, like I'm your client, right? We are both introverts. We have very similar values. And so that's what I invite people to think about. Well, yes, who's your ideal client? But before you go there, first figure out who you are and what you want, what your values are, what your stories are, what your definition of success is. It's a big one, right? How do you define success? Because if you define success in a very different way than your ideal clients, this is not going to be a match, right? So I'm reversing the module and starting with ourselves.
I like that, because I think that's something that we do forget to like bring into all of our business planning, is that idea of, okay, especially the definition of success. I've seen so many people just kind of go with, well, a successful business is X, so that's what I'm trying to hit. And when you get into actual conversation, that's not at all what's actually important to them or what motivates them. And it's so important to actually know what those things are for yourself so that you can create a plan that, your business actually supports that. It's huge. And I think it happens with from the opposite side, because, you're mentioning about, our clients are usually very much like us. From the opposite side, I see people a lot of times in business hire coaches or purchase products or programs where the person teaching it has a very different viewpoint on what success is or how to market or how to do these things. And then people wonder why they're struggling to implement or get results. And it's so
Or they
important to
feel
find that
frustrated and
alignment.
miserable.
Yeah.
So true.
It does when you're out of alignment with that. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of fear for us that if we don't kind of what's the right way to phrase this? Just step up and push through all this stuff, that we're being a pushover and people won't take us seriously in business. So how do you approach that part of the conversation about taking a softer, gentler approach to your marketing, really just being a pushover, really just avoiding sales?
Yeah, no, I really think that we can be gentle and powerful and empowering also with our clients. That's really what we want to do, is we want to empower them. If we come from a place of empathy, then instead of disempowering, which a lot of the marketing is about, where we talk about how bad of a situation they're in, that's disempowering. We come from a place of empowerment. So we empower them and say, yes, right now we understand this situation is not great. We still address that we understand that this is painful or whatever. But instead of, going on and on and on about the pain, we're saying, you can do this, you can get to the other side, and here's what the other side looks like. And it's positive. So it's nothing at all like pushover. We come to this conversation with really knowing our values and standing in our truth. And that is, someone who knows themselves really well is never a pushover. So I think that's really important to say that and say, no, this has, just because it's gentle, it has nothing to do with being, a people pleaser, for example.
I like that idea that you can have a gentle approach and yet still be very powerful in how you're approaching things. Because I think one of the things that's been interesting for me to watch in business is some of the most persuasive people I know are actually very, very soft and gentle in their approach. They're not using a lot of pushy tactics that leave people with unresolved emotion at the end of a call. It sometimes happens when you have that very hard sell approach. So there is definitely a space where you can show up really authentically as you and very gentle, but yet not let people push you around or not avoid the important conversations, still be powerful in showing up in a way that empowers your clients and your potential clients.
Right. Yeah. In the end, our main goal is to serve our clients, and we are doing them a disservice if we are not putting up our own boundaries and, standing in our values. So I think it goes.
Yes. Yeah. And that's an important point, because I think sometimes when we get into the softer side of business, people forget that just because you're taking a more gentle approach doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean you don't have rules in your business and processes and procedures and run it like a business. It just means there's more to it.
Yeah. And often as these gentle marketers, we are givers. Naturally, we're givers, right? And so we don't need to learn how to give, but we need to, first of all, learn how to receive. So underselling is a topic that I definitely talk about a lot on the Gentle Marketing program. So really learning that we also want to be able to receive. Just because we're givers does not mean that we also receive. And then, putting up boundaries. So people don't take advantage of us just because we're gentle and giving people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most interesting things I heard somebody share from stage a while back was, it's okay to have a business where your goal is to help people, to serve people, all of that, but you also have to keep your lights on or you can't stay in business. And that's something that is really important, is to look at that side of it of, yes, give value, yes, be of service, but do it in a way that is an equal circle of value coming back to you, so that you can keep the roof over your head, keep the lights turned on, keep your Wi-Fi working and paid, and all of those pieces that go along with business.
So true. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's such a good conversation to have, because I think a lot of times, like you said at the beginning, people don't question their assumptions. They think, okay, this is what I see working, so I must have to run my business and run my marketing this way.
Yeah, exactly. That's just it. Because again, what we see is the cookie cutter approach. People sharing, this is how you get a successful business. This is how you get the 6 figures. And then it's these templates or these 6 steps to success. And I'm actually raising my own hand, been there, done that. That's how I learned marketing. That's even some of it what I did on my own LinkedIn stuff back in the days. So it's just because we are surrounded with it, we think, oh, this is how it's done. But I think that there's definitely more consciousness now that maybe there needs to be another way, because again, we're at this tip of the iceberg where it's like, oh, we just can no longer go on the way it is now because it doesn't feel good. There's enough anxiety in the world already. Let's not use marketing to create more anxiety, right?
Yes. Absolutely agree with that. And I think you're right. I think there's kind of a tipping point. And I think part of what's created that, and like the need for this paradigm shift in the way we view some of these things, is that before, only certain personality types would start businesses because of the risk associated with it, because of the investment capital required. It used to be a whole different business environment. And now with the internet, as long as you have an internet connection, literally anybody can start a business. And so there's so much that has shifted in that it's bringing in a whole different personality type and a whole different viewpoint when it comes to how to do business. And I think that's one thing that's kind of leading to this new conversation. And it's been kind of the undercurrent that's been happening, right? Most people have heard, okay, well, maybe there's a different way to approach this, but it's really getting to a point now where it's becoming a loud conversation.
Yeah, so true. I think the other thing that happened is, with the start of the internet, the reason we created the internet was to have more human connections, to be able to connect with each other, right? And then technology kind of exploded, which is great on one hand, because it allowed us to have these kind of businesses. But then there was some kind of abuse of the technology. Oh, what do you mean? I can, send out all these thousands of messages to people I don't know, and spam people and ads and all of that. And so we kind of lost touch with why we actually wanted the internet in the first place. And so I'm saying use the internet, but use it to create these human connections, right? Because like we are doing now, it's amazing that we can do that. But there needs to be that kind of empathy with it, and not just bots and spamming and all of that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is funny because that is like, originally we were all so excited by the internet because we connect with people all over the world. Like I remember, because I lived in such a small town in Alaska, right? It was amazing that I could connect with these people from all over the world, like my family who lived other places, and I made all sorts of friends and connections, and my business wouldn't have even been possible without the internet. But then it did become something that like removed all the humanness from it. And I think it is swinging back the other direction.
Yeah, exactly. One example that comes up for me is these big guru webinars, right? Where, there's the one guru who is like the king of the kingdom and he presents all his great stuff. And there's like thousands of little people that you don't know any of them, right? You're just in the audience. And to me, that creates exclusion instead of inclusion, right? There's kind of this guru status, and he has figured it all out, and here's my recipe, and apply this and you will be successful. So a reframe to that would be, like Zoom is great because we can actually bring the people in rather than having this status of, I know everything and you're just my servants or something like that.
Well, the thing that I tell clients all the time, because I hear from so many people, they're like, well, but person X or guru X already teaches this. I'm like, yes, and not everybody can learn from that style. It's not a perfect fit for everybody. There's actually so much value in having different people teach really similar things, because like there's certain people I resonate with and can learn from. I have been through, I don't even know how many different LinkedIn courses over the years, and I can tell you some of them like did not click with the way my brain is wired. And there is that the difference of being able to work with somebody that you can get on Zoom and can like one-on-one or smaller group or just different approach learn from.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to what we were having the conversation about values. Like, what are your core values, and how do you find people, both in terms of clients and in terms of mentors and coaches in your own business, for you to work with who are in alignment with the values that matter most to you?
Exactly. And that's why you need to lead with the values. Like, otherwise you're just what's the word? Commodity. You're just like everybody else. There's 100,000 LinkedIn consultants out there, right? So obviously you want to be somehow different, because the skills, I'm pretty sure we all have the same skills. And so the way I differentiate myself, I say, I don't generate leads. That's not what I do. I help people, build relationships. So that's my value. It's related to the value, right, of community and building long-term relationships. And so that's where you bring in your own values into your business.
I like that, because you're right. That is the thing that's different. Anybody else who does business similar to any of us, they don't have our story. They don't have our journey. They don't have our values. Everybody is slightly different in that. And, one thing that I learned in business years ago was if you are not putting enough of yourself and your personality and your values out there in your marketing, what happens is you attract clients who are shopping based on commodity, right? They're based on, okay, you've got these skills. Great. That's the skills I need. And there's no, is this a match kind of thing? So you end up working with clients or being approached by clients who are just not a good fit, like in terms of what they offer even, or in terms of their approach or the way they think about business. And that was something that I learned, was the more of me that I actually put out there, the better fit the clients that come in are. And I don't end up with the clients who, for me, would be a nightmare to try to work with, as opposed to somebody else who they would be a great client for. So it's like this filter of just attracting the right people into your universe when you actually do put your values out there and lead with them. And I think that's such an important point for people to realize. If you are getting clients that you're like, why are these clients coming to me that just, they're not in alignment with who I want to work with, maybe look at if you're putting enough of yourself out there.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us back to the reverse marketing. You need to first figure out, what are your values, what are your personality traits, your stories, money stories, all of that stuff matters.
It does, because so often when we start with the who's an ideal client, if all we look at is this idea of, okay, well, who's got the money to pay me, which is important. You do need to work with clients who can afford to pay you. But if that's where you start and you don't take into account, who do you actually love working with and who do you actually get results for? Because for most of us, that's a specific type of client. Like, we know the clients that, okay, this type of person I don't mesh well with, they don't take my advice, they don't listen, and they don't get results. Well, with somebody else, they would do great.
Right.
But you have to be aware of that, like based on who you are, who do you work best with, so you can find those people and really make things not just, okay, my business is profitable, but I love the business and I love the clients that I have and it's profitable.
Yeah, you brought up the other. What did you say? Which movie was it again? Oh, you got mail.
Yeah.
I like this line from Jerry Maguire, not the one that's about the show me the money. The other one where she says, "You had me at hello." Right when he walks in and starts apologizing, blah blah blah. She says, "You had me at hello," and I find that line so applies to sales conversations where the client, potential client, you start to say, oh, why don't you talk a little bit? And then you go into your sales pitch and they're like, no, you hand me a hello. I already know that I want to work with you, right? And it's the greatest feeling ever because you just know it's a match.
Well, and I think that's the thing that a gentler approach to marketing actually does. Like that is the thing that it actually shifts, is when you are leading with values and you're leading with who you really are, who you work best with, all the things that you talked about. Instead of getting on the phone with somebody and spending 60 minutes trying to convince them of why, which is a horrible feeling. Oh, it's horrible. Yes. I don't, that is not my style. I know that if you're listening to this podcast, that's not your style either, right? And it's a bad feeling. It doesn't feel good to try to convince somebody of something that they don't believe, right? And have to
address
approach it that way.
Right?
Yes, it was. I remember that was one of the big realizations for me, was when I started really marketing in a way that I felt good about. People got on calls with me, and we didn't even get 5 minutes in, and they were already like, okay, so how do I hire you? Do you need my credit card? What do we do? I was like, what just happened? Because it was so different from experiences I had before, where I'd be like, okay, so here's how I work. These are some examples of client results. All of that stuff that you have to follow this script of going through this whole process of here's why you need me. It's so different when somebody gets on the phone with you. They already know they need you. And the only conversation is, or they already know they have to solve a problem that you can help with. The conversation is just, is this a good fit? When do we start? What does it look like? Yeah. So different than a traditional sales call.
Yeah. And that brings us back to the question about joy, right? That's joy, because you just know that these are ideal clients that you can serve, and that, you'll look forward to the calls with them.
That's the thing that makes such a difference. I've gone through periods in my business where I wake up in the morning and yes, my phone is next to my bed. I pick it up and I look at it. And when I look at my calendar, there have been periods where I'm just like, I'm already drained. I'm already exhausted just looking at what's on my calendar, and being able to shift things so that the clients I work with, I'm excited about. Like, I look at my calendar in the morning, I'm like, oh, this is going to be an awesome day. I get to help these people go get what they do out there even bigger, that I know is going to make a difference for people. And that like domino effect, like that gets me excited, because I want to jump into my business and I want to work with those clients. And it's so different than when you've got clients who are out of alignment and just don't fit. It really does flip everything in your business.
I think it takes a little bit of courage to let go of one style of marketing and just trust that this new, more gentle approach will work and will make you so much happier. But it is a bit scary to let go of the old, because you're like, well, I send out discounts and the sales come in. And so how do I then start to put myself more out there and all of that? That will take time. So I really understand that it can be a bit scary, but again, just think of how much more joyful you will be. And you're building a sustainable business. I think it's the opposite of the hustle business. What you're doing with the gentle approach is you're building a sustainable business.
Yeah. And that is huge, because I think another conversation that often just, it's not that it gets like pushed to the side, it's that it just doesn't even happen for people, isn't just who am I, what do I want in my business, what are my values, but what's my ultimate goal? Like, what does my perfect business look like? What do I want to have on my calendar in a typical day? What do I want to spend my time doing? And being brave enough to say, this is how I create that, and move intentionally towards that. Because there is that fear, especially, like you transitioned from LinkedIn into this, and I've transitioned multiple times in my business too. There is a huge fear that when you let go of one thing that's worked, am I going to be able to make this next thing work? And really, you've got to know what you're creating so that you can look at it and go, yeah, you know what? It's worth this risk. Creating a business that I am excited to run, that feels in alignment, that feels good, is worth the risk.
Yeah. Again, it's like we don't change anything unless it just, we feel so out of integrity with the old thing
Right.
that there's just no other way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that we can lead by example with and show people. You don't have to wait until, like me, I ended up in the ER with a complete breakdown physically because of how hard I was hustling in my business. And it took a medical doctor saying, you have to sleep at some point for you to go, okay, maybe I need to look at, what this is creating. What am I doing here? And it doesn't have to take that. And it doesn't have to be okay, shut off everything over here, start everything over here.
No.
You can look at it. And, if you're listening to this conversation and thinking that sounds good, but I'm a little scared, you can start with small steps. Just being intentional, just like after you listen to this podcast, take some time and write out, what are your top 5 values?
Right.
That only takes a few minutes to sit down and write out, and it will help you start to shift what you're doing in business, because that awareness can start to guide everything else. And I think there is a process where you can just kind of a day at a time start to change those things for yourself and start to make different decisions about how you approach your business. You just have to give yourself permission to.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, that's what I say as well. It starts with awareness. So maybe already paying attention to what's coming in, how the marketing that you see from other people, how does it make you feel? And do you want to continue to make your clients feel not good enough or whatever it makes you feel, right? And then from there, start to rumble with your story, like Brene Brown likes to say, and kind of go, what do I want really? Is that what I want? What are my values? What are my stories? And then bring more of that into your marketing.
I love that. It's such a different approach than what most people are teaching, because you're right. Most people, they give you a cookie cutter checklist of here's the 10 things you need to do every day in your marketing. Here's the pieces you have to have in place. And the problem is, if those aren't in alignment with somebody, it doesn't matter how many checklists you give me. If I don't feel good about it, I'm either not going to do it at all, I'm going to avoid it, and then I'm going to feel horrible because I'm procrastinating and avoiding it and nothing is happening, right? Because we get in that cycle, that loop with ourselves. I've done that with marketing techniques before. I'm like, I see the checklist, it's sitting here on my desk and I'm not doing it. Why am I not doing it? What's wrong with me? Instead, if you find the things, or you have to, like you said, create your own checklist and have somebody guide you through that process, because then it's something you're going to be excited to get up and do. And the way it comes across to your potential clients is entirely different because of the energy behind it.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's see. Best place for people to go to find out more about you, about this approach to business, and how they can start incorporating some of these ideas.
Yeah, I'd like to invite people over to the gentlebusinessrevolution.com. There they can find the podcast with the same name, as well as the manifesto, the Gentle Business Manifesto. That is a free download, no opt-in, just an invitation to read the manifesto and see if it resonates with you and how you feel about marketing and whether you're ready to do some changes.
Yes, I would strongly advise everybody listening to go take a look at that manifesto, because it will get you thinking about how you're approaching your business. It's absolutely worth it. So gentlebusinessrevolution.com, make sure you click over there and share it with some friends, because the best thing that we can do to start to shift some of this is really not just change what we're doing, but get it out there to other people as well. Share this idea with them, because you'll be surprised how many people kind of feel the way we do, the way we've just discussed, and are just waiting for something that gives them permission to take a different approach. So check that out, gentlebusinessrevolution.com. Share it with your friends. Have that conversation with your mastermind group, with your coach, and see what they have to say about a little different approach to what we're doing in business. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think this is one of those conversations that can really help people change the way that they're looking at things and maybe ask some different questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If you are watching us on YouTube, click thumbs up, hit subscribe. If you're on iTunes, leave us a rating, review, and let us know what you thought of this conversation. You can find Sarah and I both all over social media or on our websites, and we would love to hear from you with what your thoughts are and maybe how you're going to take some of what we shared and shift things a little bit in your own business. That is it for this episode. I will see you back again soon for the next episode of The Art of Giving a Damn. Thanks for tuning in.